Konnichiwa. This is the Shogunstein, and this is a historical background and an unboxing of the Devir game, The White Castle. It is a game for 1 to 4 players, ages 12 plus, 80 minutes, with the theme of getting your people, getting your clan, your family into Himeji Castle in Japan during what is called the Edo period. The White Castle refers to Himeji Castle, Himeji-jo. The White Heron Castle, the White Egret Castle, which is in Hyogo, Japan. It's a UNESCO site today, which is outside of Kyoto. Himeji Castle, not to be mixed up with the White Castle that makes the sliders, has nothing to do with the terrible slider restaurant, but has to do again with Himeji Castle in Japan. Himeji Castle is built in Hyogo, Japan, which is near Kyoto, which had been the original capital of Japan and is considered one of the 3 premier or original Japanese castles. A lot of Japan was rebuilt after World War II, even before Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Most of Japan, through the Allied bombing campaign, Curtis LeMay, firebombing, conventional bombing, most of Japan was ruined. So there aren't many original castles from this period that survived. Now, the Secretary of War knew the historical importance of the Kyoto area, and Kyoto was off limits. Also, another reason that Himeji Castle survived was it was built in 1601, which is just after the unification of Japan, when Japan became relatively peaceful. So those 3 original castles are Matsumoto Castle, which I was fortunate enough to visit. My friend Sugimoto-san from Saitama, Japan, took me to Matsumoto Castle. There's Kumamoto Castle, and then Himeji Castle. It was built in 1601, just after the unification at the end of the Sengoku period. So from 1300 to 1600, Japan was a very violent place. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of castles were destroyed, a lot of daimyos were defeated as they were battling each other for control of Japan and control of the shogunate. At the end of the Sengoku period, you began to get the unification of Japan. Started with Oda Nobunaga, but there's an assassination attempt and he ultimately commits suicide. He does not finish the unification of Japan. Toyotomi Hideyoshi pretty much finished the unification of Japan, but he launches a disastrous invasion of Korea, and also the fact that he was born a peasant, he never fully won the support of the other daimyo. And finally, after the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, Tokugawa Ieyasu will take control of Japan. The Tokugawa shogunate is established, and they'll rule from 1600 to shortly after Commodore Perry showed up in 1854. They'll be overthrown in 1868 with the Meiji Restoration. But Japan was basically unified in 1600, and that warring time ended. So a big reason that the castle, kind of remained in this great condition was it was built in 1601, just after all of that fighting. And then again, the Tokugawa family, when they take control of Japan, will move the capital away from the area around, it was Kyoto, and this castle was very near Kyoto. They'll move the capital to Edo. This is a famous castle. If you have seen, many TV shows or movies, when they use stock footage of, what's supposed to be a Japanese castle, very often they are showing you Himeji Castle. So maybe you saw the James Bond movie that took place partially in Japan, You Only Live Twice. That's Himeji Castle. The Kurosawa film Ran, that took place, the footage they used is Himeji Castle. And then maybe most famously here in the States, the original version of Shogun, the one, the Chamberlain version, Richard Chamberlain version, when they would show you what was supposed to be Osaka Castle, it's actually Himeji Castle. Now, I was fortunate enough to visit Himeji Castle back in 1998, and two of my favorite stories from Japan involve Himeji Castle. That's why this theme is, it's very dear to my heart, because I have such wonderful memories of going to Himeji, taking the Shinkansen from Kyoto, where my group was staying. The rest of my group was doing a city tour of Kyoto. I had been in Kyoto back in '96, so I didn't feel the need to take a city tour again. So I got on the Shinkansen by myself, put on, brought my Walkman, brought my guidebook, and made it to Himeji Castle on my own. Pretty proud of myself navigating the Shinkansen. Now, when I got off the Shinkansen, and I'm at the train station, it was very easy to see where the castle was. You can't miss it. But how would I get there? So I didn't exactly know the directions to get to the castle. I could see where it was. So I started walking towards the castle, but I still was kind of not sure the right way to go. And while I'm doing this, I see a lady, looks like she's in her 20s, maybe early 30s, and she's riding a bicycle. And she keeps riding around me, staring at me, riding around, staring at me. So I wasn't quite sure what was going on. The New Yorker in me is kind of like, okay, why is this person circling me? The other hand, I'm in Japan, it's very low crime, so I didn't think anything bad was going to come out of this. Turns out, this young lady was studying English. She saw me, Yankee hat, holding the guidebook, and she wanted to practice her English. So we walked she got off the bike, and we walked from the station. She walked me basically to the entrance of the castle. We had a very nice conversation. But what I always remember is, at the end of the conversation, I said to her, when I'm done with the tour, and before I get on the bullet train, the Shinkansen, I'm going to want to eat. Can you recommend a good local Himeji restaurant for me to eat? And she said she knows just the place, and she gave me these very specific directions to get to this restaurant. So I remember when my tour was over, and the story of the tour is a whole nother story. When the tour was over and I went to go eat, I followed her directions that she gave me that were very specific, and I'm expecting it's going to be a soba place, an udon place, maybe a sushi place, and her directions led me to McDonald's. So I guess she figured that I would only want to eat American food, so she gave me directions to the McDonald's nearest to Himeji Castle. Once I was actually in Himeji Castle, I was very lucky enough to catch an English-speaking tour of the castle, and the guy who gave the tour, it just happened to be, it was like the one day of the week that they gave an English tour. So I just lucked out. Now again, I was wearing my Yankee hat. At the time I was teaching from the Bronx. Turned out the tour guide, who lived in, and I believe it was Kobe. He was a teacher. He gave the tours once a week to practice his English. He was a big baseball fan. He was a big fan of the Hanshin Tigers, the Chicago Cubs of Japanese baseball, but he loved the New York Yankees. And this was the time, again, this is 1998. This is during that stretch in the late 90s when the Yankees were dominant. Bernie Williams, Derek Jeter, that whole era. And I just remember during this tour, on the one hand, he was very impressed with my knowledge of Japanese history and of this time period, and I was very impressed with how much he knew about the New York Yankees. And at the end of the tour, again, I went to the McDonald's not knowing at the time she was sending me to McDonald's. When I go back, I take the long way back. I take my time. I take the Shinkansen back, walk around Kyoto a bit. Eventually, I link up with my group. As many, Himeji wasn't very far from Kyoto, but I walked around. Some time had gone by, and eventually I linked up with my original group. And one of the people I was with had met an American backpacker, and he brought her to our dinner. And we were talking, and he introduced me to her. He goes, "This is Mr. Shogunstein." And she goes, "Mr. Shogunstein, you teach in the Bronx. You're you're Mr. Shogunstein. I go, yeah. And then I realized, like, I never met this person in my life. How does she know I teach in the Bronx? And when I asked her, she said she took an English-speaking tour of Himeji. She must have been on the tour after mine. And she said that the tour guide was just asking all the Americans on the tour if they knew you, and he just assumed that all the American tourists knew Mr. Shogunstein from the Bronx. So all these years later, I just whenever I think of Himeji Castle. So when I saw this game had come out, I thought again back to this lady taking me directions to McDonald's, and this guy thinking that all the American tourists have to know Mr. Shogunstein from the Bronx. So again, Himeji Castle, 1601. It's finished just after the unification of Japan. That's how it survived a lot of, avoiding those types of battles. And again, the Allied bombing campaign left the area of Kyoto and around it alone as well. Himeji Castle has some very famous features, why it's used in so many of these sort of stock photos, and again, it's a UNESCO site. Again, it kind of looks like a white bird flying. The southwest part of the southwest citadel was known for a place where people would commit seppuku. There's a well at Himeji Castle that's famous for being haunted. Okikiku, I'm probably saying that wrong. Okiku was the maid, and there's a whole story with that, but supposedly you can still hear her, in the well. Now, the western enclosure of the castle is important also because of who was sort of exiled there. In Himeji Castle, we talked about Japan being unified in 1600. It was, but it wasn't 100%. Tokugawa Ieyasu was supposed to protect the heir of Hideyoshi, and that's Hideyori. Tokugawa didn't do that, and he takes over Japan, but Hideyori is still around, and in fact, he's married off to Tokugawa Ieyasu's granddaughter. As we get closer to 1614, Hideyori is becoming a rival to Tokugawa rule. Many masterless samurai, what we call Ronin, are going to gravitate towards where he is. That's Osaka Castle, and it's going to become a threat. And there's going to be two campaigns in around 1614, 1615, led by the Tokugawa family to ultimately destroy that remaining rival, the Toyotomi Hideyoshi's son, Hideyori. And after the second campaign in Osaka Castle, they're defeated. Hideyori's going to commit seppuku, and his granddaughter, Ieyasu's granddaughter, who is married to Hideyori, will be sort of exiled to the western enclosure of Himeji Castle. And then there's a whole other story about another guy she was supposed to marry and a whole thing. She had a pretty rough life, and again, she's kind of stuck in that castle. So again, famous for that southwest citadel, for seppuku, the well, the western enclosure, and again, just being one of those rare OG original examples of Japanese architecture from that time. And again, it's architecture that was both, functional castle and for military purposes as well. So let's take a look. Here we are at almost 14 minutes. Let's take a look at what's in the box. I got this game for $20, used at a game fair, secondhand game fair here in the Phoenix area, Silver Key Lounge, and it looks like it was never played. Everything's still punched, everything's still in the box, but I did pick this up, quote unquote, used. So we got the rule book in a number of different languages. So there's like 4 rule books here. So we got the rule book, got some symbols here. Again, this is a dice placement game. The 24 karat face, do you want a picture? So you got dice. This is, again, ultimately it's a dice placement game. The dice can be very important. We have, it looks like, our gardeners, part of the castle we're going to be sending our people to are the gardeners. So again, we have yellow, blue, that's not a problem. You have this orangish, you have the green. I don't know why game companies still do that. So at 2 players, we're going to avoid using orange and green at the same time. We'll see how that 4 plays, if that's an issue. Again, I don't understand why game companies still do that. We have, that looks like, I guess these are the courtesans. And again, ultimately, we're trying to get our people into the castle. We got our warriors. Not the warriors come out to play, but the samurai. So again, during this time period, again, you had feudalism in Japan. The shoguns at the top. The daimyo is sort of like the nobles, and the samurai are the knights. And then you have the peasants, and then you have the merchants. The merchants are the worst because they do business with the gaijin. Okay, we got some influence cubes. We got some score markers. All right. We got some birds. All right, we got some. Oh, we got a promo. So this thing came with a promo. Look at that. Promo number 1. We got to build some bridges. Let's take a look at the board here. So again, we got our white birds. Again, they say the castle looks like a white bird flying. So we have our garden section of the board. We have the castle, and again, we're trying to work our way up to the highest level of the castle. And then we have the, I guess the place where the warriors are going to practice. We got a gate, and again, you got you got a well. I wonder if this is the infamous well that's supposed to be haunted. Okay. We got more cards. More cards. So again, this was considered used. This was a used game, but everything is nothing was used. So again, on a side note, best way to buy games is used. A lot of times they're not even used, or they're hardly ever used. So you're crazy to go out and pay full price for a game, to be honest with you. And try to find a good secondhand market, locally, or organize an event. So we got a lot of things to punch out. There's a lot of stuff in the box. This is not a big box. Not a big box, but there's a lot of things in here. We got all kinds of tokens and meeples. Am I allowed to say meeples? Didn't they copyright that? Someone copyright that. We got cubes. We got cards, things to punch. So we're all gonna have our own personalized score. You got the daimyo seals here. We're going to be keeping track of resources. Looks like you got food, some sort of iron, and of course pearls. Japan's famous for the pearls. Very cool. So this is a look at the White Castle with some historical background, some personal stories here. And again, hey, if you were giving English-speaking tours of Himeji Castle in 1998, I've been trying to get back in touch with that tour guide. He did come to New York one time, and we did used to stay in touch. I'd love to know what happened to that tour guide who assumed that everyone from the United States knew Mr. Shogunstein and who loved the Yankees. And I'm hoping to get back to Japan next summer for trip number 5 and get back there to Himeji Castle and Matsumoto Castle. And I did not go to Kumamoto Castle, but let's go see that third one. This is the Shogunstein out.